Hello, my name is Martyn Warwick. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of TelecomTV in London, in England. And we are here at TIA 2013 in Washington, D.C. in the US. And I'm talking with John Healy of Intel. John, welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Martyn. It's great to be here.
A few questions for you. Everything at the moment seems to be SDN and NFV, software-defined networks and network function virtualization. What opportunity does SDN and NFV present to service providers and their future business models?
Yeah, if you consider the history, where the opportunity has presented itself for something like SDN or function virtualization to be created and to evolve from, it's really been vested in the need to contain costs, manage costs and present greater flexibility in the way services are delivered, networks are built out, and ultimately how revenues and new services are created. So the opportunity it presents are, it helps to reduce the cost base. It makes a network infrastructure easier to deploy, lower cost to create and implement, and fundamentally lower cost to operate. So it has a cost benefit. But I think as importantly, or maybe more importantly, is the opportunity for future business models in how services are created, deployed, and then optimized around individual customer experiences, their usages. And that's enabled by a software-defined network that has, by its very definition, the ability to automate, to centrally manage and control, and then orchestrate services across a vast pool of composable resources that make up the entire network. For future services, that gives the service provider the opportunity to be A, much more granular in the kind of service they provide, and B, more targeted towards specific use cases and use their resources, their infrastructure more optimally.
Okay, thank you. So who do the service providers need to be partnering with if they're going to take full advantage of the opportunity that presents itself?
Great question, and I'm asked many times, is this such a change that they need a completely new set of suppliers, a new, if you like, value chain of suppliers? I think it's an evolving one. They need to partner with their existing suppliers. All of those who have built infrastructure up until now for them, equipment manufacturers and such, have a key role to play because they need to maintain the relationships they have with them. They need to evolve their infrastructure with them. But the opportunity presents significantly for them to grow a new ecosystem of applications vendors. If you think of a form of app store for the network, the possibilities are endless. New partners who create applications that can run within the network and take advantage of their ability to program the network to respond to the requirements of their application at any one time. That's a new ecosystem of partners that the service providers have the opportunity to create relationships with, to realize the growth and opportunity that presents then in having a much more open, much more programmatic, much more automated network.
Okay, thank you. What do you think will be the benefit of SDN to enterprise network users and, or, in the end, even the end user, the end consumer?
Yeah, I think we can categorize it probably on a few levels. If we can improve on the ability for the service provider, and that could be in an enterprise network too. So an enterprise service provider is the IT department, is the team managing and automating and organizing the network in support of their customers. The customer's benefit is a more streamlined provisioning of new service, shorter time to realizing a new service category than the months or weeks that it would take up today to implement and configure a new service on the network. So there's an advantage that manifests itself in terms of being able to do things more quickly. There's also the ability, though, for services to be more targeted towards the usage that you require from your device. So as a consumer, having a network that's provisioned more optimally, more automatically, can present you with a service that is more tailored to your type of experience. So it becomes more granular, and your ability to define the kind of service you require for yourself becomes more capable. There is a longer-term benefit that's talked about now about having the customer have a self-service portal into the infrastructure. And that's pretty interesting if you consider what that would present to you as a customer, the ability to go in and provision all of the resources around the service I require based on what I'm trying to do with that service at that time, and to do it in a manner that's pretty seamless to me as to how it's implemented within the network. For a customer or a user of the network, whether that's in enterprise IT or in the public network, that would be a pretty interesting set of benefits that could accrue to me as an individual user of the service.
Okay, thank you. How do you think the adoption of SDN is impacting the opportunity for service providers in other key areas, such as, for example, cloud? Obviously one, big data another, and of course service enablement.
Yeah, I think they're linked. I think there's an interrelationship between them. For cloud, really the network has been, if you like, the last bottleneck for really fully automated composable services. We've become used to virtualized assets within the cloud and the expectation that you can create a pool of resources on demand based on the service you're trying to implement or the application you're trying to implement. But the network has been largely static behind that. So as an extension for cloud services, SDN presents the opportunity to extend that concept out into the network infrastructure, make it more cloud-like. I think big data then becomes a consequence of having more flexibility, more software definition within the network. If you consider the vast array of information that's being captured around any one usage as it's being deployed, the behavior within the network at any one time, being able to aggregate, capture, and most particularly analyze that data to derive real valuable information from it is a consequence, is what big data provides. SDN presents the platform. Big data presents the analytical engine to capture the disparate types of information and then make some sense of them and make decisions based on what's learned. And then the last one, really in terms of service provisioning, I think is a consequence of the two. Now your service is more easily brought to market and can be tailored and dynamically reallocated based on the data you're capturing at any one time.
Okay, we've talked positives so far, John. I don't want to be negative, but I do want to ask you, what do you think are the biggest barriers to the adoption of SDN? Is it the old bogey of security? Is it investment? Or is it, as I've been told many times recently, actual cultural change within the organisation? A lot of organisations find this very, very hard to come to terms with, don't they?
Yeah, it's a combination. And I think the one I'd add to it is technology maturity. Because and it depends on the domain. Clearly, let's take security because it was your first one.
Sure.
The more you more you move the network and the resources to software, potentially the greater the surface threat area that you create for security.
Yeah.
So there's a downside consequence of that, and you need to do so in a manner that's rugged and that's resilient and that's secure. So it doesn't change the need to apply all of the right best practice in terms of secure implementations and implementations and management and provisioning. But that said, if you remove some of the human intervention, which by definition SDN does, because it's automatically provisioned, it's automatically configured, and it centralizes control, you can reduce the prospect or the concept of human error, at least limit it somewhat. So there's a positive and a benefit from a security perspective.
Right.
But it is clearly a concern.
Yeah.
And I'd couple that to the maturity of the technology. Many of the concepts and aspects within SDN are still evolving. For somebody who's building a public infrastructure with all of the regulatory requirements that exist around that, there's a natural reluctance to move to something that's very new, that's a little unproven, and that clearly has some maturing to do in terms of its ruggedness and resilience. And that's going to take time. That's not unusual. I think we can expect it will take a number of years to mature to the point of being entirely pervasive, but we're on that journey. The other, I think, is the cultural one, which you mentioned. Teams of technicians, network operations management, network management teams, network planners, they've lived in a vestige and a history of very understood, very closed environments by definition. They understood what they had provided, they understood how to manage it, they understood how to read the alarms from the infrastructure and respond accordingly. The more you enable that network to be programmed from external sources, applications, third parties, customers themselves, the more you change that entire paradigm. And there's a natural reluctance to leaving go of that. Also, I think what's somewhat underestimated is the years of experience built up by technicians learning the CLIs, the programming interfaces, the command languages to program specific entities within the network. In fact, they went and got qualifications to show their capabilities. Moving some of that requirement is a culture change that's going to take time to be overcome. I think what it's replaced with is a new set of skills around analytics and services definition and the need to do more with the data that's been captured from the network, which is a whole new technology and technical set of competencies that are evolving now. So I think we'll see that shift occur, and then some of the cultural challenges will erode.
One of the major themes over the past few years has been the concept of the transformation of the telco. Do you think really that SDN does have the power to transform service providers in their entirety? The business models in which they're operating currently. And can you give examples when you think this is actually happening or where you think it will happen?
There are elements of it today. I think it's interesting. If you were to draw the hype curve, I think we're still climbing up the hype side of the curve.
Getting close to the top.
Yeah, we're getting close to the top, and I think we will naturally slide back into a somewhat trough of disillusionment. And how long that'll last, I think, is an interesting debate. But the transformative nature of implementing what we might call the last bastion of vertically integrated closed systems, which the network presents. The prospect of transforming that is clearly enabled by the SDN concept, the concept of virtualizing the assets, the concept of making the storage, the network, and the compute assets all a composable set of resources is transformative. But it's one aspect of it. Several other things have to happen. We have to see the service providers realize real gains from that. Cost-benefit gains, new revenue, new services gains, a growing ecosystem of complementers and collaborators building services and applications that run within the infrastructure, take advantage of it, connect to that new environment. We need to see the open nature standardized so that the interoperability can be realized. But I think the seeds of that transformation are created. Does it in and of itself fundamentally transform their entire business model? No, I don't think so, but it's a significant step in that direction. And then as it evolves and as the environment around it evolves, we will see a fundamental transformation for sure. I think we're on that journey.
I did ask you about sort of whether or not you can give us an example of that. How near are we, how near are they in this respect?
We're seeing some interesting examples of the usage of function virtualization already within the network as a way of reducing the cost of provisioning and making it more flexible. We're seeing examples of the beginnings of SDN in the management of the links. Google, as an example, announced at ONS over a year ago how they were using it as a way of getting greater utility between the links between their data centers to get better utilization out of the bandwidth. We've done some work ourselves internally to use it as a way of bursting capacity, both for bandwidth and compute capacity, and SDN becomes the provisioning underlying capability or architecture that enables that to occur. There are a number of pockets, little examples coming. I think we're at the stage of proof of capability, initial field trial or proof of concept in an actual implementation, and then we'll begin to see the rollout on the ramp. I think we're on that path. We're a little bit away from that yet. But seeing SDN-like services deployed as revenue-generating services, that's a further step beyond that again.
I was interested to hear you say in your previous answer you were talking about collaboration. This, I think, is going to be key. Do you agree with that?
Totally.
I mean, to accelerate adoption of these new technologies is going to require a sort of collaboration that hasn't happened before.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we're of the view, and I think many are now, that the requirement for the industry to collaborate, to look for ways they can work collectively together for their mutual benefit. We think about things like the standardization or harmonization of interfaces, the definition of APIs to abstract different elements within both the software and indeed the hardware stack. To create that level of interoperability and openness requires multiple parties to come together. I think a challenge for the industry now is to realize and understand how much of that collaboration they can do, what role each plays, and to be prepared to release some of the control for the greater sort of good that will be achieved for all if they can accelerate adoption through definition, through collaboration. We're seeing that as new entities arrive into the market, those who are classically from the IT domain enter into the communications domain, and the communications domain look for the opportunity in the IT domain. That level of interplay is driving a new form of collaboration between partners who may never have seen each other before.
Precisely.
Indeed, might have regarded each other as competitors before. And then coupled to that, the need to grow an ecosystem of software application developers and collaborate with them, each with their domain expertise. Just think of the world of analytics. There are literally hundreds of small startups who have focused on specific aspects of analytics, all of them with a value to bring to bear. And in aggregate, present tremendous opportunity for solutions to be deployed. But that requires collaboration amongst multiple vendors and somebody take responsibility for herding them and bringing that together. I think that's different. We've not seen that before, particularly in communications, and that's an opportunity as much as it is a challenge.
I like the herding analogy, but it's more like herding cats than sheep, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit more.
A final question to you, which is about standards. Where do standards play into this, particularly in terms of what we've been talking about, collaboration and accelerating adoption?
Yeah, it's an interesting comment, and I'm often asked this question as well. There's a classic chicken and egg with standards. If you wait for the standards to evolve, they classically take longer. They also tend to gravitate towards a kind of common denominator by their definition, and therefore may not be the optimal implementation.
Indeed.
But there's a role for them, clearly, to ensure that you've enshrined the interoperability and the standard by which different implementations will be required to adhere. Then the flip side is you go and implement and the most preferred implementation becomes a form of de facto standard. I think we're somewhere between the two. A lot of the industry work, and we've seen things with the NFV forum and through Open Daylight and other groups and contributions to OpenStack as examples, are beginning to create implementations that can lead to standards. And I think the industry is recognizing that it doesn't want to wait for a perfect standard to evolve, but it wants to work toward preferred implementations as a precursor to a standard definition. I think that's the place we're in right now. Standards will clearly play a role. We cannot have an end state that has allowed the industry to define multiple implementations, none of which talk to each other. Because each of their own can be designed toward the end state and the values that are promised, but they don't interoperate. So we really never achieve the mass deployment and market opportunity that was originally envisioned. So they have a role to play. It'll take time to get there. However, I think in addition, we need to continue to work on the definition of and implementation of preferred implementations that really help to inform what a standard needs to be.
So in a nutshell, we're on our way, but we're not there yet.
We're not there yet.
Okay, interesting stuff. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Martyn.
TelecomTV, where ICT connects.